The Polar Bear Story. Once upon a time, in the faraway land of the North Pole, there lived 3 little friends. There was Peter Polar Bear, Sammy Seal, and Sydney Seagull. They used to meet every day and play together in the snow and on the ice. It was such good fun, and they used to make up games to amuse themselves. One morning, Peter Polar Bear decided to go exploring with Sammy Seal. They said goodbye to Mummy Polar Bear and set off in search of adventure.
Here we go marching across the ice, isn't it nice? Here we go marching across the ice to see what we can see. Oh, here we go marching across the ice, isn't it nice? Here we go marching across the ice as happy as can be. Oh, here we go marching across the ice, isn't it nice? Here we go marching across the ice to see what we can see. Yes, here we go marching across the ice, oh, isn't it nice? Here we go marching across the ice to see what we can see.
They soon found something to watch. It was a little boy. He was sitting fishing by a hole that he had cut through the thick ice. As they watched, he caught a shiny silver fish. He put the fish into his bag. Then he picked up all his things and he set off for his home.
The fisherman pulls the fishy out, the fishy out, the fishy out. The fisherman pulls the fishy out and puts it in his bag. The fisherman takes it home for tea, home for tea, home for tea. The fisherman takes it home for tea, as happy as can be.
His house was made from big blocks of frozen snow called an igloo. He looked very happy and pleased with himself.
An igloo is a house of snow, where inside lives little Inuit Joe, a place where he can go and hide, away from all the cold outside. Inside the igloo, safe and sound, so smooth and white and nice and round. It's quiet, peaceful and so calm. He's safe inside, away from harm.
Peter and Sammy continued walking across the snow. A little further on, a strange noise came to them. They followed it and saw something quite new to them both. It was a big ship that had stopped among the floating ice. The sailors had got off and were walking about on the ice that surrounded the ship. There were boxes and cages on the ice, and a strong smell of fish was mixed with all the new smells that Peter and Sammy didn't know. Quite a long way from the ship stood a big shiny cage. It was from this cage that the strongest smell of fish came. Peter and Sammy thought how nice it would be to have a taste, because that's what they both liked best of all. They very carefully crept up to the door of the open cage. There, hanging in the end of the cage, was a lovely fresh fish. Peter slowly crept into the cage, gripped the fish tightly in his little jaws and pulled like crazy. Sammy was right behind him trying to help. Clang went the door as it fell shut, and they were trapped. All thoughts of fish were forgotten, and they tried hard to escape from the horrible place, but it was no use. In just a few minutes the men arrived to see what all the fuss was about. The men were very pleased to find the 2 little animals in their trap. They would sell them to the circus for lots of money. That is what they were there to do, to catch animals for the circus. Now Sydney Seagull had gone to Peter's house to play, but Mrs. Polar Bear told him Peter and Sammy had already left, so Sydney flew off to find them. He arrived just as his 2 friends were being lifted aboard the ship with a crane. As Sydney flew around, he watched them being put onto the deck in their cages. As soon as all the men had left them alone, he flew down, and asked if they were all right. They were very frightened, but they weren't hurt. Sidney said he'd better go and tell Peter's mummy and daddy what had happened, and off he flew. Soon the captain of the ship decided it was time to go. They started up the engines, and off they sailed with the two little prisoners aboard. High above the ship, Sidney kept watch.
From way up in the bright blue sky, he kept his sharp and beady eye on the ship far down below. He watched to see where they would go. Sydney Seagull, with your big bright eyes and your coat of white. Sydney Seagull, keeping watch both day and night. The yellow moon shone big and bright. He hoped his friends would be alright. They would be scared, he felt quite sure. He wished so hard he could do more. Sydney Seagull, with your big bright eyes and your coat of white. Sydney Seagull, keeping watch both day and night. Keeping watch both day and night. Keeping watch both day and night.
After a long journey, the ship arrived at a busy port. Peter and Sammy's cage was lowered onto the dockside. It wasn't too long before the circus owner, a big, jolly, red-faced man, came to see the new arrivals. He was very pleased to find two nice young animals for him to train. They would be a big attraction, he felt sure, and they would bring in lots of people to the circus. He paid the captain, and they all set off for the circus straight away. As they all got nearer to the circus, they heard the circus music. There were people talking and shouting to each other. There was a huge, big red and yellow tent. They were surprised at how many strange animals were there. They'd never seen anything like it before. They were just a little scared too, but people were kind and fed them lots of lovely fish, and they talked to them too. That night, Peter was very homesick and sad to be so far from his mummy and daddy. He was thinking of them and missing them so much.
I'm thinking of you, so far away, so far across the sea. I'm wondering if you are sitting there thinking of me. I'm thinking if I could stop the clock and go back somehow to what we've got, I wouldn't make the same mistakes again. As lonely as I am tonight, so far away from home, I think of you, and now I know how it feels to be alone. What have I done? What can I do to be with you again? Just hoping that someday I can, my friend. 'Cause I'm thinking of you, so far away, so far across the sea, and wondering if you are sitting there thinking of me. Just sitting here wondering if you are thinking of me. Are you thinking of me?
The next day their training began. Sammy could balance a ball on his little black nose and clap his flippers at the same time. Peter learned to jump from one big barrel to another, right through a ring of burning fire.
Ladies and gentlemen, we proudly present Peter Polarbear and Sammy Seal.
They became very popular and quite enjoyed the fun of the circus.
Hi there, Mr. Tiger Cat. Where'd you get a coat like that? Shiny black and orange gold. Keeps off the sun, keeps out the cold. You walk the jungles late at night, underneath the pale moonlight. It's sad to see you far from home, far from the place you love to roam. I said, hi there, Mr. Giraffe, with your great long legs and your knobbly knees. Tell me, is it cold up there, with your head up in the trees? What's it like for you to be so tall? Does everyone you see look small? Your home must seem so far away. Let's hope you can return someday. Hi there, Mr. Lion, you look so cool and proud and strong. Your kingdom seems so far away, so far from where you do belong. From that look I see upon your face, I know how you feel about this place. If it's any comfort at all to you, I also feel the same way too. There's just one place we should all be, that's back at home and roaming free.
They soon made friends with the other animals, but still they all missed home very, very much. It was early one morning that they heard a very familiar voice. It was a cry, really. They looked at each other and both said at the same time, "That sounds like Sydney." It was just then that Sydney fluttered down and stood in front of their cages. "Hi, you two," he said. They wanted to know how he'd found them. Sydney said that he'd followed the ship all the way when they were caught. He had watched from high up in the air during the days and had slept at the very top of the mast during the night. After he had seen where they were taken to, he said he'd return to tell their mummies and daddies what they were doing and where they were. They were so very pleased to know that they had contact with home again. Sydney said that he'd come to set them free, but that it had to be done just right. Otherwise, he said, they would just be recaptured and brought back to the circus again. He said he'd made a plan with Peter's and Sammy's dad, too. They would do it tomorrow. The plan was to escape during the night after the last show. Everyone would be asleep. Then it would give the little friends time to get far away from the circus. The next night, Sydney started things happening. First he pulled the pins out of the cage locks with his strong yellow beak, and the doors swung open. Peter and Sammy quietly crept out into the dark night. They were quite frightened until they heard the deep, strong voice of Daddy Polar Bear in the dark. "Follow me," he said quietly. "Don't make a sound." Sammy couldn't go very fast on his little flippers, so Daddy Polar Bear gave him a piggyback ride so that they could all go much faster. They soon arrived at the harbour to which they'd first been brought. The familiar smell of oil and fish reminded them how much they wanted to get away and go home, but they were too small to swim all that way. "Over here!" called a voice in the darkness. It was Sammy's daddy with a little red wooden fishing boat. He had a rope gripped in his mouth, and the plan was for the two daddies to tow the little ones across the big ocean until they reached the North Pole again. Sydney would guide them from the air, because he was good at that. Peter and Sammy were soon aboard the little red boat, and Sammy's dad climbed in too. Big, strong Mr. Polar Bear gripped the rope in his big, strong teeth and soon had them out of the harbour and on their way home. They were so happy that once they were out in the open sea, they sang and laughed while Daddy Polar Bear and Daddy Seal took turns pulling the little boat.
Riding along in a little red boat, riding upon the sea. Riding along in our little red boat, seeing what we can see. Riding along in our little red boat, headed for the land of snow. Yes, riding along in our little red boat to the land of ice and snow. Oh, riding along in our little red boat, riding upon the sea. Oh, riding along in our little red boat, seeing what we can see. Riding along in our little red boat, headed for the land of snow. Oh, riding along in our little red boat to the land of ice and snow. To the land of ice and snow.
Sydney would drop in for a quick rest and a little nap now and then, and also to share fish with his friends. They soon came to the shores of the great land of ice. They left their little boat behind and went on foot. After a long, long walk, they arrived home. They were just in time for tea. Mrs. Polar Bear and Mrs. Seal were so happy to see them all, they shed a few tears. They hugged and kissed each other for a long time. They even danced around in a big circle too. Sydney was a hero for saving them all. He was very proud of himself. That night, they all slept happily in their own beds again. It had been quite an adventure, all right, but Peter knew now that he mustn't be a silly Billy again and go off getting into trouble.